Greetings, everyone, and welcome this Friday evening to another session of We the People. Uh, as you can see, we can get our little commercial stuff out of the way. We are We the People, presented by the Diamond Factory. That's the diamondfactory.org. You can go and check out our page. We try to provide some places for you to go if you're homeless, if you're a veteran, if maybe you're just down on your luck and you need a fresh start, check out our page, thediamondfactory.org. Tonight we have a very special guest, Mr. Uh, Jonathan Farley, uh, and I'm going to get as much of Mr. Farley's story in as possible because well, for one, I'm a senior myself, and I would hate to see my family put in this position. But as a matter of fact, let's get uh, Dr. Farley on stage and get our conversation started. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing well, thank you.
Ah, so why don't you we start out by getting to know a little bit about you personally? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, your background, how you got into this situation, so forth?
Yeah, I'm a mathematician. I went to Harvard University as an undergraduate, where I had the second highest GPA in my graduating class, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in mathematics. And then I went to the University of Oxford for my doctorate, where I won the Senior Mathematical Prize and Johnson University Prize, which are the highest awards they give to mathematics graduate students.
So one of the things that we always went through as high school students, or at least I did, or you hear your parents, uh, you know, learn something, and get a good job, get out there, get you a degree, get you a doctorate. Why did you particularly choose math?
So I can give you what seems like a shallow answer. When I was 14, I believe it was in 10th grade, I took a survey in English class, which was supposed to figure out my ideal vocation. And when I answered all the questions, mine came out mathematician slash statistician. And at the time, I didn't know much statistics. That hasn't changed. But that was the first time I really thought of becoming a mathematician. And since my parents are both university professors, my father was an economist and my mother was an historian, I never thought of being anything other than a mathematics professor.
Ah, interesting. I know, one of the classes that I hated was that mandatory statistics class that you had to take. It was like, wow. Yeah. But no, it's very interesting. When you say Harvard, and Harvard is in the news for different things now and whatnot. But very interesting. A Harvard degree in math. So you graduated summa cum laude from Harvard. You said with the second highest GPA in your class.
Yes, I had 29 A's and 3 A minuses. And in fact, the person they gave the award to for having the highest GPA was actually in a different class. So it was a kind of scandal. Why did they, for the first time ever, it seemed, give the award for the person with the highest GPA in my class to someone in a different class? But you can guess what their motives might have been. Um, However, I just say I had the second highest GPA.
So Oxford awarded you the highest graduate mathematics prizes. Can you share one of those breakthroughs or aha moment from your doctoral work?
Yeah. So They gave me an award for solving a problem posed by two mathematicians. One was named Bjarne Janssen, an Icelandic mathematician. And actually, once in one of our seminars, we had a graduate student from Iceland, and he recognized the name and got kind of excited when I mentioned the name of Bjarne Janssen. Bjarne Janssen also was an invited speaker at a prestigious conference. It's an honor just to be asked to speak, called the International Congress of Mathematicians. But a very renowned mathematician, Bjarne Janssen was. And the other mathematician whose problem I solved was named Ralph Mackenzie. And I consider Ralph Mackenzie to be the greatest figure in a branch of mathematics called universal algebra. So they wrote a paper in 1982 where they proved a lot of theorems and stated some problems. Now, these are unsolved problems that they didn't know the answers to. And I solved one of the problems in that paper. I've since solved the second, but I solved one of the problems in that paper, wrote up my work, submitted it for these awards at the University of Oxford. And to my surprise, they gave me this award. So I'm actually kind of pleased because the certificate, or it was actually a notice they pinned up on the wall, but it came with about 1,500 pounds, which today would probably be maybe $2,500 or something like that. But it was signed by four of the professors in the math department. Two of them were Fields medalists. The Fields Medal is the highest award in mathematics, or is generally regarded as the Nobel Prize of Mathematics. And also the runners-up for the award, or one guy is now a lecturer at Oxford, and he actually was a graduate student at age 17 in mathematics. And then another guy had the highest marks that they give for undergraduates, and then he became a graduate student. So I know I'm boasting a bit, but I was kind of pleased with that result.
Believe me, I'm pleased to have a brother with so much knowledge, on my show. You talk about mathematics, and it's really a field that I think that a lot of people of our color do not take advantage of. Um, not necessarily because we aren't smart enough, but like a lot of us, sometimes you have different priorities depending upon your social backgrounds. But you also had a 1 year position at Stanford, the Center for International Security and Cooperation. What was
Yeah,
that?
but if I can follow up on what you just said, yeah, it is true that a lot of Black Americans don't go into the field of mathematics, primarily because they may not know too many mathematicians. It's not really a practical field, it seems. And so they might go into engineering if they are interested in science, and then their families tell them you make money in engineering, whereas in mathematics, it's not necessarily the case. So I can see that happening a lot. And Malcolm X talks about this guy named West Indian Archie, who I guess was a numbers runner. And if I remember correctly, Malcolm X asked, well, what could this guy have been had it not been for racism? He could have been a mathematician, but instead he was pushed into this area. But at Stanford University, I was a science fellow at a place called the Center for International Security and Cooperation. I believe it was co-founded by Condoleezza Rice, and I studied the structure of the perfect terrorist cell. So I'm sort of going to almost contradict myself because I actually was doing some mathematics that other people said was useful. For example, a U.S. Air Force officer who later became a brigadier general said something like how important my ideas were to the Department of Defense, and the head of Jamaica's National Intelligence Bureau, which is part of their Ministry of National Security, actually used my ideas and some other ideas, he said to a newspaper, to break up a smuggling network. between Jamaica and Haiti. So that I found hard to believe, but this was a guy who's a policeman who carries a gun, and he said this to a newspaper.
Interesting. Once again, something that you would not associate with a mathematician. Like you said, a lot of people, would go into statistics and things like that, and you wouldn't not think that there was a practical application for such things. But now, you were also named one of the 15 people who shaped the global conversation about science in 2005. Was that not for science communication?
Well, they used that expression who shaped the conversation, but they were actually talking about my scientific output, and they were talking about my work in counterterrorism. So yeah, so it was 20 years ago now, but I live in the past, and I did appreciate Seed Magazine's profiling me. One of the other 15 is a Harvard University professor named Lisa Randall, a physicist, and so that gives you an idea of the kind of people they were profiling in that magazine.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Many applications, like I said, you would not think of. So, I, also, you said you talked a little bit about your family background and how you uh, inherited this thirst for knowledge. Who were some of your heroes when you were growing up?
Well, my heroes were people like Huey Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party.
Very
Um,
familiar with Huey.
yeah, and I also, and of course, Malcolm X, whom I regard as one of the greatest figures of the 20th century, um, certainly the middle part of the 20th century. And even though, of course, the ethics thousands of years ago is different than what we have today, I admired people like Hannibal, figures like Hannibal. Okay, ultimately he lost, but the idea of how the axis of the world could have been in Africa, but for a few changes. And also growing up, I admired Jesus, of course. But these are the kinds of people that I admired.
Okay. Um. So, uh, now I want to talk a little bit about the experience that you went through with your mother. Uh, it's a kidnapping, the psychological cost, the quest for justice, all of that. Could you now? I know that there's a video that you had sent to me, so I'm assuming that that's also on YouTube. If our listeners would want to see it, I did put out a link. So let's kind of return to that evening. What was it? Well, what was your initial response when you found out what had occurred?
Well, I was actually there, and my mother was actually kidnapped twice. My brother Christopher John Farley and another brother of mine, Anthony Farley, conspired to kidnap my mother, unbeknownst to me, of course. And they did it twice. The first time, I had no clue that they were doing it. It all started with my brother Christopher putting a woman in my mother's house, which was my house, but technically only owned by my mother, named Mary Ho, Ho, and ostensibly to be a home health aide. Well, my mother didn't need a home health aide, and she didn't want a stranger living in her house. And my mother even called me up and said she's never been as frightened in her life, that this woman, Mary Ho, treats her like an idiot dog. A friend of my mother's from church tried to visit my mother, and Mary Ho would not let the friend from church even talk to my mother. And when I found out about this, I thought, what is this? Um, Mary Ho told me that this woman was not on the list. And I said, the list? My brother created a list of people that, and only those people can talk to my mother. So at the time, this was my home, but I happened to have a job at a university in another city, and I had just left to go to that other city. But then I came back, and what I saw was even worse than what I had imagined. Mary Ho had taken over about half of our house. She had about 50 boxes in our garage, 50 boxes, and she had taken over, by my estimate, maybe 4 rooms in our house. My mother had been sleeping in a particular room in our house since my father died in 2010 and had been moved to another room. So Mary Ho had taken over my mother's own bedroom. And in the room that my mother had been put into, there were 2 giant suitcases belonging to Mary Ho in that room. Each suitcase was larger than any suitcase I'd ever attempted to lift in my entire life. And my mother's belongings were strewn on the floor in disorder. My mother hated disarray. So the next, my brother Christopher, with his 20-year-old son, drove up that same night. It was clear they were trying to stop me from helping my mother free herself from Mary Ho. In fact, at one point, my brother's 20-year-old son, Dylan Farley, threatened to hit my mother, or this is exactly what happened. He was cursing at me for no reason at all. And then my mother tried to put her hand on his mouth to stop him from cursing. And he said, "Don't touch me," as if he was going to beat her. And he's about 6'5" and 220 pounds. And my mother was 84 years old. So the next day, Mary Ho, my brother Christopher, and his 20-year-old son, Dylan, they leave. And my mother calls up Mary Ho and says, "Don't come back except to take your belongings." And we report all of this to the sheriff's office. Well, 2 days later, by my estimate, 7 to 10 cops burst into our house, along with Mary Ho, my brother Chris, and my brother Anthony, who had not seen my mother for 2 years, literally had not seen her for 2 years. Now, the police tell me that there are only 4 cops, but my estimate was there are 7 to 10 cops. 7 to 10 cops, what are they doing? This is like what you use for a SWAT team, if there's Al-Qaeda. And I thought that they were there to force us to keep Mary Ho in our house because I did not know the laws about tenancy. It turns out, no, we were fine in that respect. My mother was well within her rights to tell Mary Ho, who had only been in our house 8 or 9 days, to leave. But that was not, it turned out, what they were there for. So my mother, screaming at the top of her lungs, something I'd never seen before in my entire life. And we now know from the police body camera footage that she was telling them, "I need to talk to a lawyer." She's saying, "Please leave my house." They didn't leave the house. So at that point, all those people are guilty of criminal trespass. Then my mother leaves the house, I think to draw them away from the house. But she says on police body camera footage, "I do not wish to leave my property." Since they took her and she never again regained her freedom for more than a few hours for the rest of her life, that is the proof that this was a kidnapping, although I did not know it then. And my mother is on the video saying, "What, do they want my house?" And my brother Anthony is saying, "No one wants your house," but that's exactly what they do want. And in fact, next week, Tuesday, they're going to take the house that I'm in, or at least that's their plan, to take it. So it was all about taking my mother's assets, and upon information and belief, my brothers have stolen perhaps $1 million or more from my mother, and were attempting to hide this fact or prevent her from being able to do anything about it through the kidnapping. But this isn't the video that you'll see on the YouTube channel, Free Ina Farley. That what happened 5 days later. You see, I called up the police when my mother did not return, because the police told me that my brothers were just going to take my mother out for a drive. They deliberately lied to me. And so I
Uh,
thought, I
they were
thought,
taking her for a ride.
yes, they said they're going to take her out for a ride or to dinner. And so when my mother did not return by midnight, I knew that she had been kidnapped. So I waited 2 days to report it. The same female police officer who had told me that my brothers had just taken my mother out for a drive said that she would not even allow me to make a crime report because my mother had not been kidnapped and she was not missing. She was actually both. She was actually kidnapped. Well, she wasn't missing because they knew where she was, but I did not. So I did finally meet with a Sergeant Mazenga of the Monroe County, New York State Sheriff's Office, and he seemed to know where my mother was. He would not tell me where my mother was, and he would not tell me why he was not going to tell me where my mother was. I want this man, Anthony Mazenga, arrested. I want him arrested and in prison for years. So I then told him, okay, so police aren't going to be involved anymore, right? And he assured me police would not be involved anymore. So I happened to guess where my mother might be on February 5, 2023, because my mother had been scheduled to meet with a friend of hers at a concert. And so I went to the concert venue, and sure enough, my mother was there with Mary Ho and with the friend of my mother's. So I went up to my mother and said, "This woman, Mary Ho, kidnapped you 5 days ago." And my mother immediately said, "Let's go." So my mother asked Mary Ho to move aside. Mary Ho would not move. In fact, Mary Ho called 911. And so my mother barreled past her. And I asked my mother what she wants to do. And my mother said, "Let's go home." So imagine the irony that Mary Ho is able to call 911 on me, the son of the woman Mary Ho, had kidnapped. But I am not even allowed to submit a crime report to the police about how my mother had been kidnapped. So we go back to the house, and then this is where you can see some of the videos on the YouTube channel, Free Ina Farley. You can see all of the videos that the police gave us on the YouTube channel, inafarleytaken.com, not the YouTube channel, but on the website, inafarleytaken.com. They're edited by the police, but they're the only ones who edited them. So within about 15 minutes, police come to our house, and they remain there for 2 hours. This is all illegal because my mother told them immediately. They can do a welfare check, right? Okay, it's fine. It's nice to have a welfare check done, I suppose. But my
Fine.
mother told them she is fine. She didn't know who those other people were or what they wanted. She wanted to be under the care and guidance of her son, me, and she told them to leave. At that point, once more, they are in violation of the law. They are engaged in criminal trespass. They have no authority. They should all be arrested for even remaining on our property, much less doing what they later did, which was grab my mother, hurt her so badly she was screaming, "You're breaking my arm," tying up her hands and feet like a fugitive slave, tying her to a gurney, which is illegal in New York State if you're in a nursing home, which she wasn't anyway, but she eventually was taken to a memory care facility. This would have been illegal to do in a memory care facility in New York State, but they did it to take her there and then cart her away. And I did not see her again for 8 months. Now,
So when did I mean when did it dawn on you that you would have to fight the system, in order to set her free
no, I knew that after the when my mother did not return
the first
the
time?
first time,
Okay,
but they had me because they lied to me continually about the law. So the police continually lied to me, saying that my brother was the only one who could make decisions. That was a lie. My brother had no authority to make any decisions. He simply told the police that he did. Can you imagine someone so gullible. Can you imagine? You go up to a policeman and say, I am the Emperor of France. And then they treat you like the Emperor of France. That's exactly what we saw with my brother. He merely told them that he had this authority when he did not. And they admit, if you watch the police body camera footage, that they have seen no documentation whatsoever from my brother, Christopher John Farley. But they followed what he said. My mother had the authority. Now, what made them even think she was someone you could push around? And this is the problem with our current society. My mother did have a memory problem. In 2015, she fell and hit her head. She then could remember things that happened before 2015, but if it happened after 2015, she would forget it within 2 weeks. That is not something that is life-threatening. Your life is never going to be in danger because you can't remember what happened 2 weeks before. However, in 2017, she spent an unusual time visiting my brother Chris. He almost never invited her to his house, but she did go that one time, and she spent an unusual amount of time with him, like 2 weeks, I recall. And then he told us, or told me, that she was seeing doctors. I thought for her high blood pressure or diabetes. These are the only problems that she had. That's what Chris told us. But then after this, she couldn't remember things that happened the day before. So her memory precipitously declined, but still, you're not in danger if you don't remember what happened 24 hours ago. Moreover, her memory remained constant from that point, 2017, until the kidnapping, 2023. So Christopher there was nothing new that had changed that would cause anyone to want to take my mother. But regardless, there is a legal procedure for this. If you think someone needs a guardian, the legal procedure is you start a guardianship case. You do not kidnap them. That is still a crime until the person is officially declared mentally incompetent. My mother had not been declared mentally incompetent. She was not mentally incompetent. I'm the only one who could say that because I talked to her every day for years, either every day or almost every day, but I think every day for years. In addition, of course, to spending months and months and months and months of each year with her, including 2.5 years during the pandemic when it was just my mother and I in the house, or my mother and me, I suppose, in the house because we're isolating ourselves. A medical doctor couldn't tell you how she was because she didn't talk to her every day like that. But as it happens, my mother's medical doctor wrote a note unsolicited by me saying he does not understand why there was a need to remove her from the home and that she was totally taken care of by the younger son. I'm the younger son he was referring to. This was then ignored when my brother Christopher did start a guardianship case 2 weeks after the first kidnapping. So it's all backwards. You don't kidnap someone first, then start a guardianship case. You can start a guardianship case, and then if the person is ultimately declared mentally incompetent, then reluctantly you say, we're taking your freedom. But that's not how he did it. He just committed a crime. All the, by my estimate, dozen people who were in and outside our house who kidnapped my mother, all should be arrested. All of them should be arrested, just like Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, although I guess he was killed. But they were criminals of that sort. And the people in the facility that held my mother against her will. They were like Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, because my mother was being held against her will. We even have their records now, which we subpoenaed. We don't have everything, but we have some. And they themselves write how my mother was demanding that they let her go, that she was their prisoner, demanding that they call the police. An employee named Retta Rivera said that my mother had asked to call me and they refused to let her call me. She was a prisoner of them, but worse than a convicted criminal. A convicted criminal has rights. My mother had none. A convicted criminal can make a phone call. My mother was not allowed to. A convicted criminal can retain an attorney. My mother, despite demanding that she had to see her attorney, was never allowed to choose an attorney. In fact, the court illegitimately gave her an attorney And we have no evidence that that attorney saw her more than once. He certainly did not do anything to help her. And he might not have seen her more than once because my brother Chris had created a list. Remember that list?
Right, right.
He created a list, and only the people, the 17 people on that list, were allowed to even talk to my mother, much less see her. That list excluded my mother's own younger sister. It excluded me, of course. It excluded my brother Felipe Farley, although he used to date Mary Ho. You see how convoluted it is. But it excluded him. It did include my mother's older siblings, but they were too old to travel by themselves, and one of them had Alzheimer's, apparently. So my brother could safely put them on the list. And we don't know if that was the genuine list or only the list my brother padded when he knew we were going to subpoena it. It included my brother's lawyers, but not my mother's court-appointed attorney, which is why I went into this digression. So even according to my brother's own list, which was illegal, I think. Yeah, it was illegal. The court-appointed attorney wouldn't be allowed to talk to my mother. But he himself said in court, along with the court evaluator, that my mother should not even be told there was a court case going on. How could they represent her then? This was a victim of Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, and she could not even be told, much less get a lawyer, but told that there was a court case. This was astonishing. And
Yeah, this is blowing my mind here.
Be arrested. All of them need to be arrested. All the people at the memory care facility, which is called Cranberry Landing in the town of Arundecourt, New York, the leadership need to be arrested. I'd actually even say the staff, but I doubt that I'll be able to get all the records. But certainly the leadership, they all need to be arrested. The town of Arundecourt police did nothing, even though they were told repeatedly about this abuse. At one stage, there was one person on the list that I could communicate with. Remember the church friend?
Right.
She was put on the list. I think only because my brother didn't want to get the church to rally around the case. So he let one person through. And the church friend made videos of my mother. So we have about half a dozen videos, maybe half an hour's worth over the about 8 months my mother was illegally, falsely imprisoned in this memory care facility. And my mother looks terrible. She looks as if she has aged years. She sounds terrible. They weren't medically treating her, obviously, because there's this blackness creeping up her leg, which a doctor thought was must be out of control diabetes. It was always under control before they kidnapped her. And when I finally was able to partially free my mother with the help of my father's cousin, Jane Farley, an attorney, I took photographs of my mother's feet, sent them to a doctor, and his response was horrible. That was the response of the doctor. Horrible, his word. That's the medical treatment she got in this facility when she didn't need such medical treatment before they took her. But ostensibly, she was there for her health. Now, at this facility, at one stage, though, my mother said an employee had beaten her. So we have video of my mother with blood in her eye and 2 giant bruises on both sides of her face. And she also complains about pain in her chin. That's the facility she was in. And we could only find out about that by accident because of this video. Later, the church friend was removed from the list. So anyone who could possibly help her or report on how she was being tortured, beaten, who knows what else, we had no access. So there was one stage when on October 26, 2023, I got a phone call from a Matt Bailey. Now, I knew that a Matt Bailey was a supervisor at the memory care facility, Cranberry Landing, but Matt Bailey was calling from a hospital. And he said my mother's in the emergency department. So I went down there, and my mother, I have to say, she looked fine as she could be. But after another friend of my mother's of half a century also was there talking to my mother. And then after 40 minutes, 6 security guards come in and 2 other hospital employees, and they forced me out. One of the hospital security guards assaulted me. I mean, he poked me in the chest with his finger, which is technically assault.
Yes.
Um, and uh, and I was kicked out. And then later, my mother's friend of half a century, who was 78 years old, was also kicked out.
So, from your perspective, how widespread is this legal kidnapping in the name of guardianship or police action?
Well, I want to point out that this is actually all illegal. None of it was legal. It was all illegal. My brother should be arrested, and the police should be arrested. The ambulance workers who tied up my mother should be arrested, and the employees of the memory care facility should be arrested. And more police who were aware of the situation but did nothing should, at the very least, be fired, like the Iran
So,
Court police. And so,
so
but
you don't have any way to press charges?
I have the police don't even allow me to submit a crime report, and they do nothing. Since that first kidnapping, my brother has committed numerous crimes against me. For example, on February 13, 2023, he burglarized the house, or agents of his burglarized the house. I reported it to police. They refused to do anything. They didn't even come to the house to check it out. And then uh, on January 4 and January 5 of this year, he or an agent again broke into my house, which at this time I was the owner of, and they even changed the locks, which is an insane thing to do because I was the owner of the house. So this is a clear crime. I reported it to police. They refuse to do anything. There is massive corruption in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. I think that they are all conspiring against me because they know that if they think that if Chris wins, they won't be prosecuted, and if I win, they might be prosecuted. And you know what? They're right about the second part. They're wrong about the first part. Christopher could take the house because he ultimately then started a new court action to take the house, and the guardianship court judge, whose name is Christopher Chaccio, then tried to give him the house. It's all unlawful, but I allege that they are engaged in a conspiracy to commit grand larceny, namely the theft of all of my mother's assets or former assets, including this house. My mother passed away on August 4, 2024. And they think that if they can inflict harm on me by taking my house, taking my money, forcing me to spend all of my money on lawyers, that they'll be safe from prosecution. Your audience can help make sure that they're wrong about that. But I am going to make sure that my brother Chris goes to prison unless one of his escapades succeeds in doing something more permanent to me. But I think that's what's going on. Ultimately, this will be known as one of the greatest human rights travesties in the modern history of New York State, the story of Ina Farley. And if a reporter ever digs into it, not only will that reporter win a Pulitzer, but many of the police in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office will go to prison. The Monroe County District Attorney's Office was also implicated because Sergeant Anthony Mazenga is on video saying he called the District Attorney's Office the day of the kidnapping to get advice. And so that's why I suspect the District Attorney won't press any charges or even investigate anything. It's a massive conspiracy involving many different people. And they're all guilty and should all be arrested. My mother, when she passed away, it was at the age of 85, which people think is a nice long life, but her parents lived longer. Her older siblings, one of whom is 92, are still alive. One is 90, one is 92, and they had more health problems than my mother did when she was kidnapped. So my mother was not supposed to die at age 85. Obviously, what my brother Chris precipitated hastened her death. And if there were ever a true investigation, we might be able to find out if he did more than that. But certainly being drugged against her will, tied up, beaten, isolated from friends and family, did not improve her health or elongate her life, or prolong her life. And someone should have to pay a legal price for that as well. Like if you punch an 80-year-old man and he dies, it doesn't matter that if you punched a 20-year-old man, he would have survived. You punch an 80-year-old man and he dies, you're guilty of murder.
Yes.
You treat an
Yes.
84-year-old, 85-year-old woman like this, and then she dies, something similar should happen to the person who did it, and the person who orchestrated it was Christopher John Farley. His wife is Sharon Epperson. Upon information and belief, she chose the lawyer that my brother Christopher used to illegally detain my mother, and he committed perjury nonstop. And 1 month before the kidnapping, she settled or made the final settlement in a $2 million lawsuit against her. Is this just a coincidence? This is the sort of thing that should be investigated. So to answer your other question, how widespread is this? I don't know the numbers, but it seems to be that it is far more common than you would expect. That one person told me yesterday that there's always a demonic sibling. And even 2 years ago, when I spoke to one attorney named Michael Berger, he said that, yeah, there's always some sibling who was never around before, but then they swoop in at the last minute and try to take over, which is, of course, what my brother Christopher John Farley did. Guardianships need to be eliminated entirely because they are used by these crooked siblings, as I said, or family members, to steal the assets and liberty from their defenseless parents. And moreover, it feeds the lawyers on both sides. The lawyers get fed. And so they have an incentive to have more people kidnapped in these involuntary guardianships. And the judges also can dole out money to their friends because the court-appointed attorney has billed, I'm not sure how much now, maybe $30,000 or something like that, to my mother's estate, and he cannot show what he did for it. What did he do for it? He admitted in court that my mother shouldn't even know there was a court case going on, and we have no evidence that he saw my mother more than once. So what was he billing $30,000 for? Maybe it was $20,000, but I think the court evaluator may have billed $20,000 or $30,000. What did he do for that? Right, and those are just the court-appointed attorneys, much less the attorneys I had to pay out of my own pocket. My brother Christopher, we don't know where his money came from. We do know that my mother's bank account was emptied of $200,000 in the 4 months before she died. No explanation. And when I raised these issues with the judge, Christopher Ciaccio is the judge, he threatened me with sanctions. He already had fined me $13,000 when one of my attorneys tried to get my mother's bank records. So
he fined you for trying to get your mother's bank records?
Oh, even worse. He fined me when my attorney tried to get my mother's Chase bank records. This is insane. They were trying all they could in order to stop me. They have not stopped me. It may look as if my brother is on the verge of complete victory. If he succeeds in taking the House next week, Tuesday, he will have succeeded in taking 100% of my mother's former assets because I did not receive one penny in inheritance after my mother passed away. A friend of my mother's estimates my mother should have had at least $1 million. I have not received one penny, and if the house is taken, then my brother Christopher will have succeeded in taking 100% of my mother's former assets. And this is allowed. But how can your audience help? Well, your audience can help in general victims by just supporting something called Carolyn's Law with a K, which, if signed in New York State, would prevent people from doing what my brother did. Any family member would be able to go before a judge within 10 days and say, hey, I want to see my relative. And unless there was something in the record, like violence, or say, that relative would be allowed to see the person in the guardianship. If that had been law 2 years ago, my mother would be alive today and would be sitting in this house with me right now. I am certain. And the other way your audience can help is my mother's case alone can perhaps save others because we have the video. Everyone can watch the videos on the YouTube channel Free Ina Farley, and they can see this Deputy Wakefield grabbing my mother. They can see Anthony Mazenga threaten me with arrest multiple times. If they go to the website inafarleyfab5.com for February 5, you can see a policewoman named Aubrey Baldoff, who was deceiving my mother, trying to trick my mother, I think, into leaving the house, which she didn't do. So that's why they ultimately used force and tied her up. She should be arrested as well. So you can see all of this, and most of the victims of guardianship abuse don't have this video, don't have videos like this. And so by promoting my mother's case, by speaking the name of Ina Farley and demanding that politicians do something to arrest the thugs who kidnapped my mother and held her and imprisoned her falsely for 1 year, drugging her against her will for 1 year, destroying her brain with the drugs. Her brain was not destroyed before the kidnapping, but the drugs destroyed her brain. This might free other people.
So you say your mother was held for a year?
Yes. So I saw her at that hospital 8 months after the kidnapping for 40 minutes. And then I did not see her again for another 4 months. My father's cousin, Dr. Jane Farley, was able to defeat my brother Chris's high-priced lawyers in court. It was her first trial. She was an attorney, but she wasn't a trial attorney. And so she defeated Chris in court. And sadly, my mother was still given a guardian, but my brother Chris, who had been named temporary guardian after the kidnapping, 5 weeks after the kidnapping, had his temporary guardianship revoked. So then, for the first time, after over 1 year, I was free to see, well, excluding the 40 minutes in the hospital, I was free to see my mother. When I saw her the first time, she had been put at that point in another memory care facility, and she immediately wanted to leave. But at that point, she was not a free person because she had been given a guardianship, and I was not the guardian. But I tried to end the guardianship, but since I wasn't the guardian, I was not able to do it. I did not expect my mother to die, but she did die 6 months after she was partially freed from my brother Chris's control. You see, what Chris did is, after he lost control, he kept dragging us back to court because he wanted to be guardian. And he had the judge, Christopher Ciaccio, write court orders saying my mother could not return to her home. Can you imagine that? It's not a medical doctor saying this. It's a judge and my brother Chris, who's not a medical doctor, and his lawyers saying Ina Farley, my mother, cannot return to her home. And so a medical doctor named Dr. Lisa Farley said, okay, Ina Farley can live with me. So now you have a medical doctor saying that Ina Farley can live in the medical doctor's home. And Christopher had the judge write a court order forbidding that. Can you imagine this? So now we have a doctor saying Ina Farley can live in a home. She can live in my home. And the court order of the judge and my brother, written by his attorney, forbade that. And so my mother was forced into another memory care facility where she died alone.
Were you able to get a list of the drugs that they were giving her before she passed?
No, because I've been denied all access to information. This is the perfect crime. Chris Farley was able to lie to police, saying he had the authority to control my mother. Then, after a violent kidnapping, he gets legal authority from the judge, Christopher Ciaccio. And from that point on, everybody tells me I have no say. But then, once Christopher is removed as temporary guardian, he still gets to determine what goes on. It's unbelievable, right? He still gets to decide what goes on. This is the corruption we're talking about in Monroe County's government and court system. And then after she died, Christopher then raced down there apparently to make himself the informant for her death certificate, even though he wasn't down there as far as I know. If he was, that's something police should look into, because my mother had been put in a memory care facility in South Carolina at that point. And that's where Lisa Farley lived, and the medical doctor. And then he started a probate case, to talk about what we all would inherit without informing me. So I didn't know that it was going on, and so he made himself the executor of the estate. So he's got it all wrapped up in a nice bow. So I think right now I legally don't have any authority to find out anything about my mother, because they'd probably tell me, "Oh, you have to go to the executor." That's what I'm guessing. I think at least one person has told me something like that. But he's not going to get away with it, because I am finally going to start what I didn't do before, offensive lawsuits, because my brother had kept me preoccupied all this time with his constant attacks. And now, if they tell me I don't have standing, so be it. But I am going to do that. If your audience, the evidence is, even though I don't have all of it, we have a lot of it. One of the drugs, though, that they gave my mother, to answer your question, is called Seroquel. It's a drug for schizophrenics. No one in our family has ever had schizophrenia. My mother was not a schizophrenic either. But it's a drug that the facility admits they used to control my mother's behavior. They said she was being aggressive.
It's to zombie her out. That's what it's for.
What?
It's to zombie her out.
Yes, exactly. It was to zombie her out. Exactly. And so that's what it was for. And they're not supposed to use drugs to try to control behavior like that. And of course, if my mother, anyone who knew her would find it hard to believe she could ever be aggressive. But if she was aggressive, it's because she had been locked up against her will, and no one she could talk to was telling her why. So it would have been perfectly reasonable for her to be angry if, in fact, she was. But we'll
frightened. And frightened also.
Yes, and frightened. Can you imagine? Because she did have a memory problem. So can you imagine how frightened she must have been, that she's locked up, no one is letting her out, and no one is telling her why, what's going on, where is Jonathan, why isn't Jonathan coming to help me? She'd probably.
I mean, this must have been a nightmare for someone.
The last 18 months of her life in hell, thanks to Christopher John Farley. Because even after we partially freed her from him, as I said, he would not allow her to return to her home. She only saw her home for 1 hour for the rest of her life after the violent kidnapping, because my other brother, Felipe, brought her back here. He had become guardian at that point, and brought her back here to see her house for 1 hour before taking her to South Carolina. And he didn't want to stick around because my brother Chris had called the police and said that Ina Farley had been kidnapped. So can you imagine how rich this is? When Chris Farley kidnapped my mother, I'm not even allowed to file a crime report. But when Felipe, legitimate guardian, takes my mother to South Carolina, Chris gets the police department to start a multi-day investigation for kidnapping, including watching the airports and getting security camera footage. It's almost as if they work for my brother, Christopher John Farley. And what would incentivize them to work for him?
See, one of the reasons why, I thought this was a very necessary story, I'm 78 years old myself, and I, recognize, once you get past a certain age, I mean, there's a certain amount of scammers that attack you every day. There's so many different avenues where seniors are attacked. And this was something that I had never heard of.
My mother would not have been in any danger from any scammer except my brother, because her brain was still working. She just couldn't remember what happened 24 hours ago. She could reason, she could have conversations, and we did every day. We talked about complex topics like the news, which she watched multiple times a day. No scammer other than my brother, my two brothers, Christopher and Anthony, could have tricked my mother.
So,
So
was there this type of dynamic between the brothers before this?
no, I never imagined that this could happen. In fact, it took me about 6 months before I realized that the motive was probably money. My brother Christopher, I can say, did steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from my mother, in this sense that he forced her to be in this position where her money was spent, or at least he stole amount. The exact amount I can't say. I don't know. But he certainly stole that much because she didn't need to spend it, and he forced the money was taken from her accounts. But I allege that he may have stolen $1 million or more. As I said, his wife Sharon Epperson was sued for $2 million, and she's did the final settlement 1 month before the kidnapping. Is there a connection? I do not know, but it should be investigated. Certainly an interesting question. But regardless, a friend of the family who knew what my parents' salaries were and knew about their pension plans estimates that my mother should have had about $1 million. And so I now allege that my brothers must have stolen that money and did the kidnapping in order to hide the fact that they have stolen the money.
Now, you say you're about to lose the house Tuesday?
I'm about to lose the house on Tuesday. So what happened is my brother Felipe, even though he used to date Mary Ho, I guess he had a change of heart. And when he became guardian of my mother, he sold the house to me. I became joint owner with my mother. My mother actually is on a video saying that she wants me to have the house after she passes away. And she told this to many friends and to me, but it's on video. And then when she passed away, I had the right of survivorship. So the house belonged to me. But then Christopher's had one of his lawyers. He has right now, by my count, he has 4 lawyers right now. You can ask, where's the money coming from for this? But he has 4 lawyers, and one of them got the judge, Christopher Ciaccio, to reopen the guardianship case, which normally should end when the person who had the guardian dies, and she died 5 months before this. And then he ruled that the transfer of the home was invalid, and so he was giving the house to the estate of my mother, but the estate of my mother was controlled by my brother Christopher, who had used fraud to make himself executor of the estate. So essentially, it's this more, I call it, I allege that this is a conspiracy to commit grand larceny involving the judge, Christopher Ciaccio, involving the Monroe County Sheriff's deputies who refused to arrest my brother when he broke into my house. His lawyer admitted it to police that my brother Christopher had sent an agent, or had done it himself, but probably sent an agent to break into my house and change locks. This should normally get you handcuffed immediately. He's free. He's free to continue his legal harassment of me, which has resulted now in an eviction, which will be ruled on Tuesday. So unless something happens, some miracle or judicial last-minute reprieve, I will be evicted from the house that I owned 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Now, I understand, criminal charges, burden of proof, and all that. But what about civil action? Haven't you been able to I mean,
No, no. I want to be crystal clear. I have the proof for criminal prosecution. There is no question Chris Farley and all the people you saw in the video committed a crime. There is no question of it. My mother had not been declared mentally incompetent, not by a judge, not by a doctor, No one had the right to come into her home, and she was the sole owner of the home. No one had the right to come in and take her from the home against her will. Even
Right.
the guardian,
That's criminal trespassing. I mean, without a
it's
doubt.
assault, battery, false imprisonment. I don't know what drugging someone against her will is called, but there was that as well. In addition, of course, to then the taking of her assets. So no, there's no
You
question.
mentioned the thoughts on a person.
Yeah, she was dragged out. She was screaming, "You're breaking my arm." They tied her up. They tied up her hands and feet. That's how they got her out of the house. And who knows what they did to her at Cranberry Landing? We'll never know because they wouldn't let anyone in there except for this one church friend, and that was only I think a couple of times. So we'll never know what tortures my mother was subjected to. As you said, as I said, we have a video of my mother with blood in her eye, two giant bruises on both sides of her face. She complains about pain in her chin, and she told the church friend who made the video that she had been beaten by an employee of Cranberry Landing, the memory care facility. So no, we have more than enough proof of crimes. What I don't have is the ability to get the police to do anything about it. They simply refuse. They simply refuse. The DA, I have not heard from the DA's office in about 15 or 16 months. And the last time I wrote a letter to the DA's office, within 24 hours, all the videos on the YouTube channel Free Ina Farley were deleted, along with a video on a channel called Leroy Truth Investigations, which had a video about my mother. Who has the power to do that? And is it just a coincidence that this happened within 24 hours of the letter that I'd sent to the district attorney's office? No, this is a massive criminal conspiracy for which there is ample evidence. But how do you arrest the police?
Precisely. Yeah. I mean, we've on my program, we've talked about police reform. We've talked about why people may be apprehensive of the police, and then you bring up a case such as this, which I say when you're talking about elder abuse, this I'm speechless.
Yeah, I was too, and still am. Now, in terms of civil action, I've been trying. I've been looking for lawyers. I've been unable to find any lawyer. And now I'm going to try to just do it pro se by myself. But the legal system is extremely complicated. They make it that way deliberately. And
Of
so
course.
I'm gonna try to sue somebody, but I don't know how much success I'll have. Another complaint that was made to me over the previous 2.5 years was people would say I don't have standing. So once my brother was named temporary guardian, which he was named 5 weeks after the kidnapping. He started a guardianship case 2 weeks after the kidnapping, and then 5 weeks after the kidnapping, he was named temporary guardian. After that, everybody told me I have no standing. Now, I don't believe that that's true, but that's what everybody told me.
But if you have a video,
Yeah,
I mean, much like, maybe I'm stretching it here, but much like a dying declaration.
yeah. No, you would think, yeah, the video is there. Now, the police kept me from getting the video for about 6 months, but I do have it now, and it's clear as day.
Are they saying that she was mentally incompetent when she made the video? I
No,
mean,
no, no. The video of my mother being kidnapped with the violence. So there's no question that they acted illegally. They had no legal authority. If someone is a harm to himself or others, then police have some authority to step in.
yes.
But you have a video of my mother speaking calmly with police for 2 hours, and she was calm until the very second Deputy Wakefield grabs her. So they can't claim that she was a danger to herself or others. And it was all illegal. So there's no question of that they broke the law, but I've been unable to get anyone to take any action. And I'm going to start with a civil action now. I expect I'll be told either the statute of limitations has expired or I have no standing. but I'm going to try to see what I can do.
Statute of limitations. You said she just passed in August, right?
She passed away in August, but they may say the clock started from the time of the crime, and now it's getting up to 2.5 years. So, incidentally, I speculate that this may also be the reason behind my brother's never-ending legal harassment of me. He wants me always on the defensive. Essentially, he wants to make me homeless next Tuesday, so that I don't have the time to organize anything, in order to get him prosecuted or get people sued. That's just my speculation. But I could also speculate, and your audience could speculate, where is my brother getting the money from? His lawyer told my lawyer, Jane Farley, Chris's lawyer told my lawyer, Jane Farley, that this was a $300,000 guardianship case. I infer from that he had billed my brother, Chris, $300,000. Simple question for your audience to ask. Do you have
that would be $1 million, right? They take 1/3. That would be $1 million if it's a 300.
Yeah. Well, do you have? Well, no. He wasn't saying. Well, he was saying that that's how much he had billed my brother. That's what I infer. So, do you have $300,000 to spend in 1 year? And if you did have it, would you spend it to do something your mother did not want and did not need? And so, the simple question that anyone could have asked throughout the whole process, including my attorneys, incidentally, I'm sad to say, where did Christopher Farley get the money from? And why was he willing to spend it?
Well, the lawyers,
One can allege that he was willing to spend it because he had either gotten more from some other source, or it was to prevent a bad consequence, which would have made it worth it to spend that much money, such as going to a prison. This is speculation, but that's the sort of thing that the police should have investigated and that the FBI should have investigated. But instead, when I called up the FBI, one of them hung up on me within about 2 seconds after I said it's a family matter, literally within about 5 seconds after I said it, I used the word family matter. And then I reported it maybe a second time. Nothing was done. And a few months ago, someone claiming to be an FBI agent called me, and then he said, "No, there's no way that the police would do this. Why would they risk going to jail?" Well, they did do it. It is a good question. What was their motivation? But the fact that they did it, you can watch the video. Yeah, now, someone might think, oh, okay, are there some other records? Okay, the first record would be the police report my mother and I made before the kidnapping. We went to the police to report Mary Ho. That report, they say, is now missing. Well, that's interesting. How does any report go missing? Surely it's in a computer somewhere. But regardless, they say they can't find it now. Then the next report was after I reported my mother missing. And the police report simply said, oh, they came to accompany Chris because he wanted to put my mother in a nursing home.
So where is Mary Ho now?
Huh? Sorry?
So where is Mary Ho now?
I do not know where Mary Ho is. On February 13, 2023, she came, as I discovered belatedly, to burglarize the house. She removed her belongings from the house and stole some of our belongings with some other people. I guess also including Anthony Farley. The police were aware of this and did nothing. They may even have been present when this happened. So we have another interesting situation where police let non-residents of a house break into a house and steal items from the owner of the house and the only other legal resident of the house. Can you imagine that? And then I haven't heard from Mary Ho since then. When I tried to have my lawyer subpoena her, I was told she couldn't be found. So I don't know where she is.
I mean,
but I will say this.
I mean, this sounds like, one of those Tom Clancy novels or something. I mean,
yeah. No, Christopher Farley did study this because there's a playbook. There's something called the Brooklyn Playbook. and they tell you how to rob a grandmother and steal her stuff. And it goes like this. First, you isolate the victim. Second, you defame all protectors. I'm not the only one this has happened to. And then third, you loot the estate. Christopher John Farley has done all three steps, but he didn't invent those steps. There's a playbook. So if you did research in advance, you would know how to do this. Why police fall for it when it's a known playbook is beyond me. Why judges fall for it, why this FBI agent was skeptical is beyond me, because I now know about it. You can Google it, the Brooklyn Playbook. Another list is isolate, medicate, liquidate. So you isolate the victim, and then you drug the victim so that the condition that did not exist before now exists. The person is confused or a zombie. And then, of
Right.
course,
That's why I asked you what kind of medication she was on.
yeah, so I do not know other than the Seroquel, which incidentally, the FDA said you should not give elderly patients with dementia because it increases the likelihood of death. So, and increases confusion. So in other words, the so-called medical care facility gave my mother a drug that was more likely to kill her and make her confused, even though they claimed she had to be there because of her mind. And I use the term dementia only because they keep using it. My mother's only problem when they kidnapped her was she had trouble remembering what happened 24 hours before. That was before Mary Ho moved in.
Short-term memory.
Yeah, she could remember things that happened long ago. It's just that if it happened recently for more than a day, she wouldn't remember unless it was something bad. She could remember bad things that happened. And indeed, the employee of Cranberry Landing, Retta Rivera, said that my mother had told the employees every day how they got her, how she wound up in that facility. So the person with a bad memory presumably could remember that. But it doesn't even matter. You don't lock someone up. You don't lock someone up because she has a bad memory. Like maybe if you forget what happened 5 seconds before, okay, that's a different story. But you don't lock someone up because she can't remember what happened the day before. And you don't do it against her will. The law says you're not allowed to. The guardianship law says you're not allowed to take even someone who has been declared mentally incapacitated. You're not allowed to put him in a facility against his will. I mean, there may be some caveats, but that's what I read when I look at the statute.
Not unless they're a danger to themselves or to others.
Yeah, but I want to say that because the statute, if you read it, it doesn't even give that caveat. But that's what it says. So none of what they did were they allowed to do. In fact, it says that ideally the person should be left in his home or her home. My brother Christopher has never given any reason and never been asked to give a reason why my mother could not stay in her home. So you have to ask the question, why does he want the home? So I almost like the fact that he's trying to take the home, because now anyone like my uncle, my mother's older brother, who might think that Christopher John Farley was acting in the best interests of my mother, it doesn't matter if he was, because she was the one who had to make the decision, but in fact, he obviously wasn't. But anyone who thinks that, then you have to ask, okay, why does he want the house now? Because he knows my mother wanted me to have the house. My mother's on video saying she wants me to have the house. So why does he want the house? Why does he want to evict me and make me homeless? Either he needs the assets, in which case we have to question everything he did. Or, okay, if he doesn't need the asset, then why does he want it?
Yeah, that's why I'd asked you about the family dynamic before.
Yeah, so I never knew, because I always thought he was the most successful of us. He has what I think is $1 million home. I once met one of his neighbors who was the president of the Goldman Sachs Foundation. He lives in New Rochelle, New York. So that's the kind of neighborhood.
Very affluent.
Yeah, that's the kind of neighborhood he was living in. So I didn't expect that he would be needing money like this, but that's the kind of investigation that needs to be done and should have been done and still has not been done. but eventually will be done. Whether my brother takes this house and makes me homeless or not, unless he has one of his thugs end my life. And I want to point out that that's not paranoia, because he obviously had my mother, his own mother, dragged out by force and locked her up for a year. Unless he has one of his hired thugs take my life, this will be uncovered. And he's going to go to prison. So all of it will have been for nothing. He didn't need to torture my mother for the last 18 months of her life.
Well, I would definitely love to do a follow up with you, of course, to see how this, kind of plays out. And I mean, this could also be, a groundbreaking, type of statute, that could finally be invoked, and put an end to this type of nonsense.
Yes.
Just because a person is older, or gets older, does not mean that they're incompetent.
Yes. At no point did so when my mother was being held against her will, and I checked with my lawyers every so often to confirm this, she had not been declared mentally incompetent. So they were just holding her without her even having been declared mentally incompetent. She was eventually declared mentally incompetent 10 months after she was kidnapped by the judge. I'm not aware that 2 psychiatrists evaluated her, which is what the law says. I'm not even aware that 1 psychiatrist evaluated her. I do know that we were never allowed to have our doctor evaluate her. And I do know that her doctor never saw her or talked to her.
Well, aren't you supposed to have more than one opinion? I
You would
mean,
think
the
this is the question that should have
the
been asked of Christopher John Farley. Why, and the judge, Christopher Ciaccio, who I think should be impeached, and I think his judicial immunity should not even protect him. He should be arrested as well for the false imprisonment of Ina Farley. Here's the question. If Ina Farley is clearly mentally incompetent, why can I not have my doctor evaluate her? Why can she not have her doctor evaluate her? Because
right. I
either,
mean,
either they
the
agree.
families, the estate, I mean,
Yeah,
there's
more
supposed to
opinions
be
are
a
better.
procedure,
Why doesn't Chris Farley want more doctors to evaluate my mother? Well, why didn't he want more doctors to evaluate my mother? Why is it only the people working for the facility who obviously have a financial vested interest? So their opinion should
yes.
be illegitimate because of their financial conflict of interest.
Now,
Nobody asked this question though, except for me.
may I ask, because I know that this would really be out there, but is the estate being asked to pay this facility any money?
Oh, so I have not seen any financial information about how Christopher handled. Oh, let me rephrase that. 2 months after my mother died, my brother Christopher submitted 9 months late um, a report about how he was supposedly handled my mother's finances. It's about 200 pages. I haven't gone through it all, but the numbers don't add up that my brother has been given. But I don't have an accountant to go over it. I don't even know what the right laws are in order to challenge it. And uh, but um, but I will say this: I got in some other way my mother's Chase Bank records, and they show that $200,000 were removed from her Chase Bank accounts in the 4 months before she died. But before she died, and her TIAA-CREF account was emptied the month before she died. The only person that we know of who had the access to her accounts was my brother Chris and my brother Felipe. And my brother Felipe says he did not have access to my mother's financial accounts, even though he became guardian. He says he did not have access to her financial accounts. So this should be investigated. And now Christopher Farley claims that my mother's assets are worth nothing except for this house. Now, the house was not actually among her assets, as I said, because I owned it, but he has now done this, what I call conspiracy to commit grand larceny, to take control of the house. So he is saying she has no money. Let me rephrase that. He claimed she had $25,000 left in her Chase bank accounts, but one, I see no evidence of that. He provided no evidence of that, and I have found evidence that she had less than $6,100, maybe $0. And moreover, that's a far cry from the $200,000 that she had in those same accounts 4 months before she died. No explanation given as to where the money went. No one demands an explanation except for me. And when I did, the judge threatened me with sanctions.
That's fraud.
It's fraud. Yeah, it's fraud. So he's claiming the estate has nothing except for this house. Um, so um, when he takes the house, he was given the house, control of the house. But if he succeeds in kicking me out of the house next Tuesday, I will have received not one penny in inheritance from my mother, Ina Farley. Now, you want to ask about the facility. So she was put in this facility for a year, but even after the year, she still had $200,000 in her Chase bank accounts. So that didn't take the money. And moreover, she had health insurance, long-term health insurance, that she always told me would pay for everything if she ever needed to be put in long-term health care. So nothing should have come. The amount of money she had could not have been depleted, even though she was put in a facility. As for the lawyers, the judge said that my mother's money should not be used to pay Chris's attorneys or my attorneys. So my mother's money should not have been taken by the attorneys either.
Right. I mean, that's why I'm kind of asking, because
Yeah.
I've never heard of this scenario. I've never, I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
So it's a mystery where the money went because you can't justify it by saying that the money was taken by the facility, and you can't justify it by saying the money was taken by the attorney.
forensic
And then
accounting,
the money is gone.
forensic accounting. I mean,
I have not been able to get a forensic accountant, nor is the court doing anything, obviously. As I said, whenever I raise the issue of where's the money, I get threatened with sanctions by the judge.
well, sir, as I said, I would definitely like to have a follow up with you on this. Uh, you know, because this is something that as far as I know of, has been unheard of. I mean, you hear these type of things, and when I looked at the video, I'm like, I mean, this could happen to to anyone.
Yes, it could happen to anyone because remember, as the police admitted on video, they didn't see a single sheet of paper from my brother giving him this authority. Moreover, he did not have that authority.
And she's
That
the owner of the house.
he was the sole owner of the house. Yeah, so it's a shocking thing. Now, the worst thing that happened was not her being evicted essentially from the house, but that is in fact how one could describe it, an illegal eviction. New York State is supposed to be this state where you have all these rights if you live somewhere. Even if my mother had not owned the house, a landlord could not take her out of the house in that way. A landlord could not take me out of the house in that way. But as it happens, my mother was the owner of the house and the sole owner of the house. And someone who was not an owner of the house could have her taken out of the house like that.
Yeah, and you're talking about other people coming in and taking property out of the house
Yeah,
after. I
yeah.
mean,
And that happened in a funny way. I was going to meet with an attorney, and when I came back, I noticed that all the stuff had been taken. And then I contacted the police. They didn't get back to me for about an hour and a half, and when they did, they soon revealed that they knew all about it. One could speculate, were they monitoring my location, which would have been, of course, illegal because they had no reason to be monitoring my location. How did they know I was going to be gone long enough for them to come and take stuff from the house?
uh, yes. I mean, as I said, this story needs to be, getting front page, type coverage.
Yes,
I'm sure there are, like if they can put your family through this, and you mentioned already two states, New York and South Carolina, I believe.
Yes, I
I
haven't
mean,
done anything in South Carolina, so I don't know what I could do there. But
I mean, there are state lines involved here.
yes, yeah. Well, after my brother Chris was removed as temporary guardian, that was when my mother was taken to South Carolina. There was the guardianship, but at that point, while my mother obviously didn't wanted to be in her home.
Yeah, she was
Uh,
taken out of her home. That's I mean
yeah,
that for a person that that has lived in that home and
yeah.
I mean
I thought it was safer for. I have to say, I probably should be looking into what can be done because she was taken to South Carolina. But I want to say I was okay with her being far away from my brother Chris, who lives in New York State, because there was a time when, right after about 2 weeks after she was freed from Chris's direct control, she went to the hospital where she stayed for about a month. It was very strange. One day she's leading a conversation amongst about 4 or 5 of us, and then 2 or 3 days later, I find out that she's in the hospital and she's almost not comatose, but she can like barely speak. And then she gets better.
I'm sure that was because the drugs.
Yes, I think so. And she was getting better. And then my brother Anthony shows up, and then the next day my mother's almost comatose again. And my brother, I heard, so I'll say upon information and belief, that my brothers Chris and Anthony were saying that if my mother gets, telling the doctors in the hospital, if my mother gets a heart attack, don't revive her. So I was quite happy to have my mother be 1,000 miles away from Christopher and Anthony, who both live in New York State.
I mean, so wait a minute. Your brother signed a DNR for your mother,
No, they didn't sign anything. This is not, they don't
but you
operate
said
legally. They don't
you
operate
said
legally. They were simply telling the hospital that they are the ones in charge of my mother's health. This is, I'll say, upon information and belief because I heard about it through my brother Felipe. But at one point, I was in a meeting with one of my mother's doctors at the hospital, with my brother Felipe, with my father's cousin Jane Farley, who's also an attorney, and with my attorney. And all of us were arguing with the doctor that Chris Farley does not make decisions about for my mother. And he was
I,
saying,
I,
and
I
he was
have a DNR. It has to be signed and witnessed.
there was no such thing. That's not how Christopher was able to kidnap my mother with no papers, no documents. No one saw anything. He is now able to evict me. I haven't told you the best part about the eviction. He's able to evict me from my house, which is scheduled to happen next week, Tuesday, even though someone else owns the house. The judge tried to reverse the sale, but his reversal of the sale is unlawful. Someone else owns the house, which the judge does not have authority over. Someone the judge does not have authority over. And so the ownership of the house, if you go to the county clerk's office and ask them for the deed, they'll show you a deed that says I own the house, but in fact, someone else owns the house that I sold the house to. Um, and so Chris is still able to get people to act as if he is the owner or the one in control. That's his superpower. And so he was telling these, upon information and belief, the doctors at the hospital that he was the one who decided whether or not my mother should get CPR if she has a heart attack, and he was telling the doctors no. And it took 4 of us, me, my father's cousin, an attorney, Felipe Farley, an attorney, and my attorney, to argue with the doctor, and we still couldn't convince him that Christopher Farley had no legal authority about my mother's health because he'd been removed as temporary guardian. That's his ability. And so the doctor was saying, "Oh yeah, she's suffering," and she wasn't suffering. And should we do anything? I think he may even have suggested starving her, not giving her nutrients. Well, anyway, while she was in the hospital a long time, when she was out of the hospital, she was able to see her grandchildren, and we have videos of her walking around and talking with her grandchildren and so forth. She was in the hospital for dehydration and high sodium.
Well,
This, these are sick people. They
yeah,
are
yeah, yes,
they are demonic people.
yes, yes, they are. Like I said,
Yeah,
is something that, I mean, uh, you can call it, Silence of the Lambs,
yeah,
Django, whatever you. I mean, this is just, it baffles me. But I'm so glad that we were able to get your story out, and we are on LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as YouTube. Is there some final thoughts that you would like to give our audience tonight?
yeah. So obviously, I wish I could have saved my mother. I want to save other people, but we can save other people by letting people know about the story of my mother. Obviously, you can go to the YouTube channel Free Ina Farley. But more significantly, yes, I do need to start offensive lawsuits. We're gonna win. We have the evidence. I just need a lawyer who will do it. And so, if you have a cousin who is who wants to not only do good but make money in it, um, then have them contact me so we can finally start suing these entities, from the police to the facility that held my mother, um, in order to make it so that they're justly legally punished for the crime they committed.
You should also inquire to some of these law schools around. You have students that are willing to, take on, work, graduate students. I mean, they're try to make sure you try to get all your ducks in a row.
That's a good idea. I'll start doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to learn how to use, the system is abusing you. You have
Yeah.
to learn how to use the system to your advantage.
Yes. Yeah. I'll do that. I had not thought of that before.
Yes.
So thank you.
So thank you so much for your time. As I said, I would love to do a follow up with you, maybe within the next 30 days or so, to see what has happened. If that would be all right with you.
It would.
Well, thank you so much. I, I'm really baffled at this situation. We talk about being a nation of laws and law and order and so forth and so on, and then you get these cases where there are clear cases of fraud and circumventing the legal process,
Yeah.
and it's uh, it happens to regular people. I mean, it doesn't have to be, your millionaires and billionaires. These things happen to regular people.
Yeah. But I do think that my brother, I allege he probably did take $1 million.
Well, I mean, however that part turns out, I mean, the victim here is your mother.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
that, and that's sad. When you see sons turning against their parents. I mean, you
What's
know,
worse also is that if he had taken $1 million, and I allege that he has, probably, or something like that, my mother would have just given it to him. She wouldn't have cared. She would have said, okay, fine, keep it. He didn't need to torture her for the last 18 months of her life and then continue 8 months after her death to viciously attack me in the courts, trying to make me homeless.
well, again, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us, and I will definitely send you a note, and we can have a follow up on this.
All
Uh,
right, thank you.
and maybe you can find some organizations that are willing to help you by then too.
Hopefully, yes.
So, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your story, and I look forward to having you back on the show uh, once we can see how these things get a little more resolved.
Yeah.
I mean, you uh, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like here you might even have a RICO case against these people. I mean, it's
Oh yes, certainly.
serious.
I think there's a conspiracy to commit certainly grand larceny at this moment, and the general conspiracy by police against me. It seems that they almost are working for Christopher John Farley.
Yes, sir. So once again, thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate it, and I sympathize with you for having to go through this. But hopefully things will work out in the end. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, everyone, that's our show for the evening. We will be having Jonathan back and listen, see what happens with this story because, uh, you know, it could be your family tomorrow. You never can tell. So, thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate your time. You can catch us right here on every Friday and Monday on We the People. And we look forward to having Mr. Farley back in the very near future. Thank you, sir. And is that, was that free at Ina Farley?
Ina Farley, the YouTube channel, and also InaFarleyTaken.com, InaFarleyJan31.com for January 31, and InaFarleyFeb5.com for February 5. You can watch the edited and unedited police videos.
Now, are you? Do you do any speaking engagements? Is there any other ways that you try to get this message out?
I have not, but I would certainly be open to doing so.
And a book.
I was thinking of writing a book called "How to Steal from a Grandmother."
Yes, yes. Such a sad story. Uh, Thank you so much tonight, sir. And once again, you can also we are streamed on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So if you have any followers or social media, you can pass this on to your followers, and hopefully we can have someone get in touch with you and maybe give you some more information.